afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's stakeholder call, where we'll be discussing the Washington WEIM Greenhouse Gas Enhancements draft tariff language. My name is Isabella Nicosia, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the web conference today. This draft tariff language is available out on the ISO website, and you can get to it by going to kaiso.com. You'll go to the Stay Informed tab, and then you'll click Policy Initiatives. That'll take you to our main Policy Initiative landing page. And down at the bottom of the page, you'll see a link out to this initiative. You'll click that, and then it should be one of the very first activities that pop up, and you should be able to link out to the draft tariff language. We did take comments back on this language already. Comments were due last Friday. I believe we just received one set, so we may be able to address those later. And then before I hand it over to Sarah, I just have a couple reminders to go through. This call is being recorded. The recording is for informational and convenience purposes only, and any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. We will be taking questions throughout the call today, so if you have a question, you can raise your hand by pressing the raise hand icon, which is located just above the chat window. If you connected to audio outside of the WebEx, then you'll need to press #2 to raise your hand. And then just a reminder for everyone to please start by introducing yourself, so your name and your affiliation. That way everyone else on the line knows who the question or comment is coming from. And if you need technical assistance at any time during the meeting, please send a chat to the event producer. Our event producer today is Yasi. So the agenda, I'm going to turn it over in just a second here to Sarah, and then after we run through the draft tariff language, we will open it up for any last questions and then go over some next steps. So Sarah, I'm going to pass presenting rights over to you, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Great. Thanks, Isabella. I'm going to share my screen, and while I do that, I will just say welcome and thank you to everyone for joining on this holiday, so happy Halloween. Let's see, does that, I think that shows up on my screen, so I think that means you all can see it.
Yep, looks good.
Great, okay, thanks, Isabella. All right, so everyone, today we are discussing the Washington Cap and Invest Program, WEIM enhancements, the tariff language there. As a reminder, that the final proposal in that process, which was approved by the board last week, seeks to do two things. The first is to update reference levels to allow Washington in-state resources to reflect the cost of GHG compliance in their default energy bids and commitment costs. And then second, it supports the reporting by Washington WEIM entities. That second piece there, the reporting piece, is not something that is addressed by our tariff in the California or other context, and thus it will not be addressed in the Washington context, but it is something that CAISO is committed to, and of course we will be continuing to work with WEIM entities and the Washington agencies as that program evolves. I do have Anya Gilbert on the phone from policy today if any policy questions do come up. And I'll just remind you that the tariff language is meant to, of course, implement that policy and not make any changes from what everyone is aware of from that stakeholder process. So we received, as Isabella said, one set of comments from PacifiCorp, so thank you for those. I will address those in the meeting today. But I plan to just walk through the tariff language. There are two pieces here. The first is that we've updated tariff sections related to the reference levels, so existing tariff language, to include reference to the Washington Department of Ecology. And so we'll go through some of those. The second piece is that we specify the methodology for calculating the greenhouse gas allowance price for the state of Washington. So I'll pause between those various tariff sections or those various tariff changes, and then I also will address some questions from PacifiCorp about where these prices are posted publicly. All right, so now turning to the language that I have up on the screen here, I will note for you that this section 30.4.5.1 was inadvertently not included in the language that was posted to the website. Part of that is because there is parallel language for non-natural gas-fired resources that's nearly identical, and so I missed that that was not included in the document, but the changes are exactly the same, and I will just try and not give you a headache as I scroll, but note here that we have the proxy startup costs where we are changing the language to include the state of Washington and the Washington Department of Ecology down below. And then similarly, in the proxy cost minimum load costs, we have made similar changes here, including Washington Department of Ecology. As we scroll down, let me find the spot and then I can pause it for you. All right, so here again, this is the language that was posted. Again, nearly identical language, but related to the non-natural gas-fired resources. But again, the same idea here, we are including the state of Washington and the Washington Department of Ecology in these proxy startup cost tariff language sections to indicate that the state of Washington and the Washington Department of Ecology are both imposing and then also regulating that program. I'm going to move again, and again, I apologize for the scrolling on your screen. Similarly here, the proxy minimum load cost has the same changes. Okay, so we're still in this, this idea of including Washington and Washington Department of Ecology. We've made similar changes to the projected greenhouse gas allowance price, again, referencing Washington Department of Ecology. The language here at the bottom is to indicate that each of the unlinked jurisdictions that regulates GHG will have a separate projected greenhouse gas allowance price, and we'll see later that this same language is included in the calculation of the GHG allowance price section. Again, the idea here is we understand that there may be linkage in the future, but as there's not linkage between the two programs now, we will have two separate calculations for that value. Scrolling. Okay, so this is the first place that I wanted to sort of address a change that has been made from what's posted in response to some further thinking and some additional comments that we got. This here is related to resources with greenhouse gas compliance obligations. And really, the language itself is just saying that if you provide language to one of these government authorities, that the information you provide to the CAISO will be the same or will be consistent. And so initially we had included a state agency or governing state agency language, but to keep this consistent with the rest of the tariff, we have determined to revert this back to including the specific California Air Resources Board or CARB or Washington Department of Ecology, and just for the sake of transparency and for your understanding, our intention behind calling out the specific agencies or specific government authorities here is to be really specific in our tariff about who's actually regulating these programs, what the governmental authority is. And so here, the more specificity, the better. We understand that there may be additional states in the future that have similar changes or similar programs put in place, and we'll have to address that language as we evaluate as we evaluate the program and how it plays into the market, sort of similarly to how we did with Washington here. And I believe that, one more section here, this is on the calculation of default energy bids. And again, sorry, I'm scrolling. Okay. Here we also have this idea of the calculation of the greenhouse gas cost adder, referencing both the Department of Ecology in Washington and CARB here in California. So before we move on to the next section, where we're actually discussing the greenhouse gas allowance price, I want to pause and see if there's any questions on the inclusion of Washington or reference to Washington.
So as a reminder, you can raise your hand by pressing the raise hand icon above the chat, or you can press #2 if you connected to audio outside of the WebEx. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay, thanks, Isabella. We'll move on for now. So I'm going to just scroll through. Okay. So this section here, this is 39.7.1.1.1.4. This is the calculation of the greenhouse gas allowance price. And this is, I think, where we've made the majority of tariff amendments that have more substance to them. So the first piece of this here, of course, we discussed earlier, which is that the unlinked jurisdictions will have separate greenhouse gas allowance prices. So that's the first change that we're making. The second change that we're making is previously the CAISO had indicated which two specific vendors the CAISO would use for calculating that price. We are now proposing to change this to have the specific vendors included in the BPM rather than in the tariff here. So that's the second change, but the intention again is to maintain this blended price from multiple vendors. So we plan to make that change here. And then the last piece is this longer sentence, which I will highlight, and this is, I think, sort of the bulk of the policy. This is how the CAISO will approach determining the correct price or the appropriate price when there has not been an auction or when there has not been when there's not a vendor that has an index for us to utilize. So we have, again, this is directly from the policy. This utilizes sort of a stepped approach, which is that initially the CAISO plans to use this $41 amount until an allowance auction is held. And then at that point, the CAISO will utilize the most recent allowance auction price. The highlighted language was suggested by Pacific Corps, so thank you for that. The first highlight being to specify that this is a more official allowance auction, so adding some specificity to the tariff there. And then the second is to indicate that we will use the most recent allowance auction clearing price. We intend for this to be, for the system to be programmable, or excuse me, configurable, so that, if there is an additional auction before two index prices are available, we are able to update it to utilize the most recent allowance auction price. My understanding is that the Washington auctions will be quarterly. So this allows us to, again, continue to update the price to whatever is the best available proxy. Are there questions on this section?
Not seeing any.
Okay. Well, then I will move on to the last piece here, which are two questions posed by Pacific Corps, which I think are useful for the group to hear as well. These questions have to do with where can we find the language, or excuse me, where can we find the prices posted publicly. So both the GHG allowance prices and the gas price indices are posted publicly on OASIS. If you go to the Prices tab and then the Index Prices tab, the GHG allowance index price has a page, and that's where we intend to post. It's where we currently post the California allowance price and where we intend to post the Washington allowance price. For the gas price indices, we do post the real-time market price, similarly under Prices and then Index Prices, and under fuel prices. However, I do want to note that we do not post the day-ahead market. We do not we do not post the gas price index for the day-ahead market, and that is because we use one vendor often, and so the idea behind using some of these blended rates is that the vendors themselves, their proprietary information, and so you can get that directly from them rather than us sharing their information. And for the day-ahead market, we use the Intercontinental Exchange. So I can follow up specifically with PacifiCorp to more specifically, address those, the various tabs to click on, because I know it's sort of a lot to write down or to process verbally. But if others want that information as well, I'm happy to pass that along. But with that, I'll open it to final questions.
Do you have any questions?
Well, I am always available via email if anyone thinks of anything, and I know Stakeholder Affairs also is willing to field some of those questions as well. So if anything comes up after the fact, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk through any of this.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any further questions, I think we can conclude. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all for your participation this afternoon, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Isabella.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.